What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Dylan Talks Tone. Today we are going to talk guitar setup again. Today we're going to do the Les Paul. So any kind of Les Paul style guitar, this is a Gibson, but any kind of Les Paul style guitar this would probably apply to. And honestly, pretty much most everything that we're going to talk about today, there's a couple things that don't, but pretty much everything we're going to talk about today is going to also apply to anything with like a stop bar tailpiece type of deal. So this should be a fairly, pretty flexible video for what we can do. Very first thing we need to do is make sure that you have the strings on the guitar that you want to play, a new set, and make sure that it's tuned up to pitch, okay? Very first thing. So, and in the tuning that you're going to use on the guitar. So if you're going to go half step down, if you're going to go full step down, if you're going to do some kind of alternate tunings, some kind of different string weights, anything like that, make sure that you establish that first, put that in the guitar, tune it up to pitch, and then we'll be ready. I'm going to move the camera over here and we're going to go through some of the basic actions of what we're going to do, and let's get this thing rolling. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to check our neck relief. Now normally when we do this with the guitar in playing position because you don't want to have a saddle underneath here that causes you to, have tension on it or whatever. So normally we do this in playing position, but because we are trying to shoot a video, that's kind of why it's done like this. So we'll go ahead and fret our first fret with a capo, which is what I typically do just to act as a third hand. And then we're going to come up here to where the guitar, where the neck attaches to the guitar, which is right here, because that's where, honestly, that's kind of where the truss rod stops working, basically, is right here. And then we're going to just check about halfway in between, we're going to check how much neck relief we have. Now, I think Gibson's spec says 5 to 15 thousandths. This is 5 thousandths. And it is just barely a little bit loose, so a little over 5 thousandths. I'm going to leave it there because I actually like my neck relief to be flatter than more. I like less neck relief. I like it to be pretty friggin' flat. So we're going to go with 5 thousandths. Basically by fretting here, fretting there, and just checking halfway in between, that's where we're going to go. If you just check this in playing position, just to double check it, then to make sure. Okay, let's see. So the next thing we want to do is I want to check our nut on this guitar, check nut height, and just make sure that it's good. Now this guitar's already been set up once, so it's probably good, but we just want to make sure that there isn't any wear. All right, so zero this, 23, zero it again, 21, zero it again, 17, zero it again, 20, zero it again, 23, flip that thing around, zero this, 18. I'm going to go with that. I think that's pretty stinking cool. So the other thing we want to talk about is the nut cut on the guitar. Because we have a compound angle here on a Gibson, a lot of folks will say, well, the G never stays in tune. Well, it can. It absolutely can. You just need to make sure that there is no binding in the nut. Which takes a little bit more skill with this. We could do a full video on how to do this, but we just need to make sure that when that slot is on it's not a sharp angle off this way, but it's also not straight. So it needs to kind of have, I don't want to say a curve, but there needs to be kind of a split the difference between a straight and a sharp angle. You need to match this, but when it breaks over the nut right here, you want to make sure that it's not kinking the string here or here on either side of the nut. And that's what will keep you in tune. If you have binding on this side of the nut where it starts its angle, or binding on this side of the nut where it finishes its angle, then you will have tuning instability. But if you can smooth that out, smooth those edges out, then it will work better. That would take kind of its own video to dive into, but that's kind of the long and the short of it. But the nut height is good. So let's move on to string height. All right, so Gibson spec is 5/64 at the 12th fret. I moved the neck cradle down to here because then it doesn't give us as much wonkiness because it's underneath the heel of the neck. So we're gonna go ahead and go 5/64, which is what, 78 thousandths of an inch here, and then 4/64 on the high E. I think that's what the spec says, but I think I'm gonna go 78 thousandths. I think I'm gonna go 60. So let's just check this here. 64. 56, 53, 44, 43. Okay, so that's pretty dang low. I think we're going to actually go up a little bit. I've got it really, really low, but we're going to go up a little bit on the other side. This side's good. I like the 60. I'm just going to go up a little bit. Cool. 47. So we've got, on mine, we're going to go 50 thousandths, 60 thousandths instead of 70 thousandths. 60 thousandths, 70 thousandths. So anyway, that's what I've got there. Now, this is where we get into a little bit of a controversy. Okay, now that the guitar is more or less set up, as far as the string height goes, then that means that all the playing angles are set. But what we've got is we've got string bind against the back of the bridge here. This is no bueno right here, okay? We want to, at this point now, raise the tailpiece up so that we do not have binding on the back of this bridge. Now, if we were to have lower action, if we were to have a little different neck angle, if we were to have a little bit different setup on the guitar, different fret size actually, because that will actually change the height off of all the heights, then we may not have this issue even with this bridge. It just depends. So wherever the setup on the guitar ends up, we just definitely do not want to have this binding on the back of the bridge. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise it up. So I put a bunch of blue tape on my screwdriver because I don't like to mar up my screws. And we're just going to do this evenly on both sides until we get what we want. All right, so now we've got the tailpiece raised up to where we're not making any contact. There's going to be a bunch of people that get in the comments and talk about sustain, bro, and all that, but it doesn't matter. Sustain doesn't come from the tightness of this screw, okay? The threads have just as much contact with the wood if it was down or if it was not, okay? So it doesn't make a difference. It just doesn't. We've done a video on this. We've tested it. This guitar has enough sustain for you to lose patience with yourself. It will last longer than any song you're playing needs. it will be totally fine. So don't worry about it. Just set the guitar up so that it works. Okay, rant over. Next thing we need to do is set our intonation. Now, I will tell you, you need to adjust this before you set your intonation, because when you raise this up, you might not have heard it, but there was some creaking going on right here as these strings kind of slid this way a little bit. So the breakover of the string will change a little bit. It doesn't change the intonation, but it does mess with the string. So I like to wait until everything is done, okay? Everything is done, including this adjustment, and then we're going to adjust the intonation. All right, so now after we've messed with this, let's go ahead and get this guitar tuned up. Okay, so here's how this works. If the meter goes that way, we need to move, when we're facing the meter with the guitar, right-handed, if the meter goes that way, we're going to move the saddle that way. If the meter goes this way, we're going to move the saddle this way. That's my little cheat. So we'll go ahead, and now that we've got it tuned up, we're going to just go like that, and then we're going to fret the 12th fret. Oh, that's pretty good. All right, so it's drifting that way a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and take our screwdriver and move the saddle toward the nut, which means we're going to tighten it just a little bit. Now we'll move the saddle this way. G string, same thing, it's drifting towards the nut a little bit, so we're going to move the saddle towards the nut, which means give it a little tighten. This is awesome. This is set up very, very nicely. Action super low. Anyway, yeah, it's killer. We don't have strings hitting the back of the bridge. We don't have intonation issues. We don't have any string bind at the nut. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. This guitar actually played really well anyway, but I like to touch them and chuck them a couple times a year, and it was time. So I think it's pretty cool. Now, obviously, everything we did here was kind of on an already established setup. A couple of questions that folks may have, and I've seen it in other video comment sections. One is obviously addressing the whole putting the guitar on its back while it's being set up. We talked about that. You know, when you do your neck relief, you probably want to check it in this position, in the playing position, okay? The other thing people have asked about is, shouldn't you check your string height before you check your nut height, because it's, you know, it's angles. If you're doing a brand new setup on a guitar that's never been set up before, like if you're building a guitar, then what I would do in that case is I would set it up for 70 thousandths here real quick and then check your nut height. But on a guitar that's you've already played, chances are it's going to be close enough to make sure that your nut height is right. You know, if this action is really high down here, then obviously your nut height's going to be higher. But if it's something that you've already played, you know that it's not. You know what I mean? That being said, if you want to kind of set a standard, I would set everything here at 70 thousandths of an inch, and then change this, or I guess 5/64, which is a little higher than 70 thousandths, and then go ahead and check your nut height after that. But like I said, again, if it's a guitar that you've already played, already been set up, it doesn't really matter which one you do first. Personally, I like to do the nut height first. And then on the Les Paul style stuff and stuff with a stop bar tailpiece, raise that tailpiece after you've set your string height. Because when the bridge comes up, then this angle gets more acute, and we want to be able to compensate for that afterwards. The other thing about setting your string height on a guitar like this is if the radius of the bridge is correct, like this is a 12-inch radius fretboard, so this is a 12-inch radius bridge. They match. So you don't have to worry too much about your string height in the middle strings, because on this guitar you can only adjust the low E and the high E and hope that the rest of it is good. If that is not the case on your guitar, because you've got a mismatch in parts, or some reproduction guitar, like some knockoff guitars, will use different bridges with different neck radiuses and such, and you can run into this problem, then you have to do a little more thinking about it, because you actually have to file the saddles. So we could do a separate video on that if you want me to. I can show you how you figure that to make sure that that works. Because if you don't want to take it off the wrong saddle and then end up with those strings being too low. So there's a trick to that. We could do a video about that if you want. And then the other thing is, don't check your intonation until after all of this is done, because you're constantly changing tensions and lengths and everything. So you want to do your intonation last. There you go. If you have any questions about Gibson Les Paul setup or Epiphone or anything like this, get in the comments and let me know. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you in the next video.